Hello and welcome to the Wood Memorial Day handicapping session presented by Daily Racing Form, sponsored by NYRA.com. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale. Very happy to be here with DRF's New York handicapper, Mike Beer. Mike, how's it going today?
Everything is great, Pete. We got a big weekend coming up. I'm looking forward to not only the races in New York, which I think they got a pretty solid card going on over there tomorrow, but obviously with Keeneland opening up, there's plenty going on this weekend.
Absolutely. Now, let me ask you, as a New York guy, somebody who plays New York racing all the time, what for you is the bigger key moment in springtime? Is it opening day of the baseball season or Wood Memorial Day?
Is that supposed to be a real question? It's Wood Memorial Day. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I haven't, and I don't really know the reason for this, but for some reason, most of the major league sports and even the college sports that I used to follow religiously and spend like way too much time paying attention to, they've really dropped off my radar the last 5 or 6 years. I almost pay no attention to those sports for most of the year anymore. It's almost all horse racing all the time for me, for better or for worse. And I'm hoping it's for better going forward, because this was a tough winter for me on the inner dirt. I really struggled the last 4 or 5 months. I'm happy that they're off the inner and back on the main track in New York.
It's a great thing. I will say other sports, racing has a way of taking over. Baseball, though, really good. If you're one who can do your handicapping at night, ball game on in the background while doing handicapping, that's a good double. That works for me.
That's how I watch all my sports now, just in the background, not really paying attention, almost no rooting interest, which makes it, way less fun. And I learned the hard way several years ago not to be trying to bet on that stuff after I took about 10 bats.
Well, the official sponsor of our webinar today is NYRA Bets. NYRA Bets is offering a special bet 150, get 150 sign-up promotion. Can't be easier to earn your sign-up. Bet from anywhere, anytime with NYRA Bets. NYRA Bets is available across the USA. Go to nyrabets.com and sign up today. We're going to start today's show by taking a look at some of these graded stakes on Saturday's card. We're going to look at races 6 through 10. Then we're going to move on to both the Bluegrass Stakes and the Santa Anita Derby. Using the webinar tool, folks can ask questions at any time. We'll get to as many of them as we can along the way. But without further ado, let's start talking horses here, Mike. Race 6 is the Bayshore. If you're a NYRA Bets customer, it's also the start of this special pick 4 they're having for their customers. So with that sort of pick 4 in the back of your mind, what's your approach going to be to this year's Bayshore?
Well, I will say this. I am not disappointed that this pick 4 for the NYRA Bets customers starts off with the Bayshore, because, there are a lot of good stakes races on this card, but the Bayshore just happens to be, one of them that I feel like I have a fairly strong opinion in, and, whether it turns out to be the right opinion or the wrong opinion, this is a race I want to be involved in. And so I'm happy to start the pick 4 here. The conversation, I think, has to start with Theory, Todd Pletcher's now 3-year-old starting back off a layoff, who's just a horse. I know that he's the horse to beat. I'm happy to call him the horse to beat in this race, but I'm not sure how much I really want to be betting on Theory, just because I want to see what he does in his 3-year-old debut. I think everybody remembers his debut at Saratoga early on in the Saratoga meet last year. To me, he was the most impressive 2-year-old maiden winner at that entire meet last year. I mean, he was super impressive when he won first time out for Pletcher. And the problem with him is everybody sort of knows by now, is that he had a little issue after that race. Pletcher was even saying that he was not going to run again as a 2-year-old. And, then for whatever reason, and I don't know what the reasoning is, they decided to try and get him back at the end of the year and make the Breeders' Cup with him. And I wonder if that was a good move for this horse. I know he won the Futurity first time back off the layoff. The Futurity wasn't a strong field. The horse that it felt like he maybe had to beat in a lot of ways, Reckling, the Asmussen horse that he beat first time out, was a total no-show in that race. And this horse got it done. I wasn't impressed. He got the same figure for the Futurity that he got in his debut. I thought his debut was a way better performance than his Futurity was. And then they went to the Breeders' Cup, and he was just awful in there. Chased the pace from the start, never looked like he had enough to keep up with those horses. threw in the towel before they hit the far turn. I didn't like that performance for this horse, and I don't like that they, sort of forced him into that race at the end of the year. And so I think it's fair to wonder what you're going to get from this horse off the layoff as he goes 7 furlongs for the first time since then. And I want to bet against him in this race. To me, not like there's a ton of options against him, obviously, but I think you're either going for Long Haul Bay, who ran a 90 Beyer speed figure on his debut for Chad Brown, a figure which was confirmed when the horse that he nosed out in their horoscope came back and ran a 91, winning his next start. So it feels like it's a legit 90 that this horse ran. He seems interesting to me in this race, but he's a now second-time starter. He's got to go 7 furlongs. He's got to face a couple of better horses. He can win. I'll use him in the pick 4, but I like Migsy in this race. I'm going to bet Migsy to win, and I'm going to really key my pick 4 around him, just because I know that he didn't win his first 2 starts sprinting, and then he won when they stretched him out for his 3rd start. I kind of feel like he didn't improve stretching out, Pete. I think he won that race last time just because he was a little bit better than those horses, and he just held on at the end. He did some good things in there. He took on a couple of challenges. He turned them away, and then he held off the late run from Glenn Richmond, his stablemate, who won his next start. But I still think he was better going shorter. His first 2 starts that he didn't win either of, I thought he ran great both times in some pretty tough spots. I think he's a better sprinter, and I love him turning back in this race where I have some question marks about the favorites. He needs a trip from the rail. I think if he gets one, this is a field that he can beat. And so I'm happy to sort of lean on this horse to start off the pick 4.
I agree with you completely about Migsy probably wanting less ground. That was sort of the word I'd had about the horse prior to the race, and the way that the race played out. I sort of hung on because he's a game horse, but not a horse for whom distance would be the friend. And you mentioned the one thing that gives me a little bit of pause, which is getting the trip from the rail. How do you see this race playing out pace-wise for Migsy? I mean, do you think they're just going to try to break and get him out of there and get position going forward and hope for the best and hope that the inner post isn't a factor?
Yeah, I think that's probably what they have to do. I think, on the plus side for having the rail in this race, it's only a 6-horse field. I don't know how much trouble you can really find, and it's not like, there's just a ton of speed in here for a graded stakes, sprint race. I suspect that Theory might just be fastest early and make the front in this race, which would be to his advantage. It's not like there's a ton of pace in here. So I don't think he should really be compromised by trip that much. I always worry a little bit when I have the rail at 7/8, but it's really not supposed to be that big a deal in this race. Because again, if you just going through the other horses, I mean, where's the other speed in this race? Theory's probably going. The other Chad horse on the outside is not a speed horse. And by the way, You're to Blame, who we didn't really touch on, he's a horse who I will also use a little bit in the pick 4, just because I think he's better than he looks on paper. And when they turned him back that was a good turn back for him to 7/8 at Parks. I don't know if I agree with that figure that he got to 68. I think that race was a lot better than the 68 makes it look. And he's a horse, this is sort of his game. I think these sort of elongated sprint races are probably going to be his thing. And he's a horse at a decent price who's probably a little better than he looks.
All right, let's move it along to the 7th race, a first level allowance for state-bred males going also same distance of 7 furlongs on Aqueduct's main track. Is this a race where you're looking to narrow down, or a race where you might attempt to spread a bit in this NYRA Bets pick 4?
I'm not going to spread too much in this race. I do want to just start off, and I think, you're almost sort of forced in this race to start off your handicapping and just deciding what are you going to do with the 2 Cause for Surprise or the 3 T Loves a Fight. 2 horses that just, they both won their most recent starts. They both won them really impressively. They both got big figures for those wins, and yet both of those races just sort of came out of nowhere. It wasn't as much of a surprise for Cause for Surprise because he had run a couple of fast races early on in his career. I mean, his horse has run 16 times already. At least he had a couple of fast races on his page, against cheaper horses or not. He had run pretty well. And then he just sort of lost his way a little bit. He was not running too well on the inner dirt prior to that last one. And he just, for whatever reason, he just exploded and he ran a 93 Beyer and he won for fun. I mean, obviously, if he can run a 93, he's really tough in this race. I think it was even way more of a surprise for T Loves a Fight. I have no idea what happened in that last race with him. I don't know where that race came from. He had never looked like a horse who could run an 88 Not that he had run poorly in his prior starts, but he was just not a fast horse, keeping sort of cheaper company. I don't know how he ran an 88 last time, Pete. If he runs an 88, he's another one. I mean, I guess he's just going to be really tough in this race. So you're forced to decide what you want to do with these two horses. Personally, I don't really want to use them. I think they're meeting some pretty good New York breds in this race. I'm certainly not going to use T Loves a Fight. If he's just, found himself for a great trainer, then, maybe he'll just keep heading the right way, but I can't bet the race that way. And I'm not going to use him. So I like two horses to the outside. I think the 6 Bourbon Empire might be the horse to beat in this race. This is a horse whose first 2 career starts sprinting, the only 2 times they sprinted him, were really good. He was a big price on his debut. He ran a super race first time out, and he crushed that field. And then they brought him back in the Notebook Stakes for a second start, and he ran great again. He got off to a terrible start in that race, and he gave away way too much position. At that time, Gold for the King, the horse that won the race, was the top New York bred sprinter, the top 2-year-old New York bred sprinter, and he won the race. This horse came with a big finish at the end after that bad start. He galloped out strong, and he looked like he was just, could be anything. So I sort of understand why they stretched him out for his next 2 starts. And I also just feel like they found out now that he doesn't want to go long. He's not a 2-turn route horse. That's the kind of stuff I'm glad they gave him the shot to do it. It's stuff that's better found out sooner rather than later, and now they turn him back, and this is what he wants to do. So I suspect that he's going to run really well here. The one little nagging concern for me with Bourbon Empire, and the reason I didn't make him my top pick in the race, is because it's now three races in a row where he's gotten off to terrible starts in his race, and I think it's really starting to become a problem for him.
Yeah, I was going to mention
not always his fault.
Maybe more of a problem going shorter than longer, but is this where you,
right.
just, out of deference to connections, just sort of hope that who knows, maybe a different rider, maybe just more experience in the mornings, that those poor breaks or something that'll be in the rear view mirror. I mean, I guess that's part of what you're betting if you're betting Bourbon Empire.
Yeah, I think that it is. I think you have to at least be concerned about it. And obviously, the price would go a long way to mitigating it. I think he's actually a pretty fair price at 5-1 on the morning line. And, and I will say, outside of the race 2 back in the Gander, where he just, as soon as the gates opened, he just went straight up in the air and he totally missed the break and got out running that race. The other 2 races, the last one where they tried to get one more route out of him, and the Notebook Stakes, he got bumped in those. It really wasn't his fault. He got, bumped between horses and just, lost all position. On the other hand, I think he sort of causes his own problems because he doesn't break sharp from the gate, and horses get out of the gate ahead of him, and then he just loses all position. And it's really cost him. I mean, it cost him bad in the Notebook, and it cost him bad again in the Gander. And last time, he didn't break well again, but he just didn't run well either. He needs to turn back. I think he's going to run better. I'm worried about, his gate antics. And so that's why I didn't put him on top. And the horse that I did put on top is a horse who's just drawn a couple of posts to his outside, and that's number 8, Royal Acadi, who is making his 4-year-old debut in this race. I liked this horse as a 3-year-old for Barclay Tagg. He was very, very green in his early races. He would run in his races at the end, but he felt like he didn't really have the game figured out. He's just one of those horses, you'll see him from time to time. It just felt like he didn't really know what he was supposed to be doing out there. When they stretched him out for a second start, that was a really strong pace. Nobody was finishing at all in that race. He got a little tired, but that whole field got tired. And then he got wired at Saratoga by Benevolence, who was in this race. He had the rail in that Saratoga race. He didn't get out of the gate that well. He drifted way in towards the gap there, and out of that 6.5 furlong chute. And then he just sort of raced on. It was sort of an even performance. It wasn't great, wasn't terrible. But he got a little bit of a layoff after that. He was gelded between that Saratoga race and the Aqueduct race on November 9th. He came back a new gelding for that race, and I think it did him a lot of good. I mean, he kept right up with the pace in there, and I love the way that he finished that race off at the end. The horse that was second to him, Playwright, was coming from the back of that pack with a big run down the outside at the top of the stretch. And as soon as this horse saw him coming, he started running again, and he just got away from that horse. I really liked the way that he won. You got a layoff to deal with him. I don't love taking horses off of layoffs, but it's not like it's some super long layoff. I like the way that he's been working at Palm Meadows. It looks like he's been training fine to me. So I'm just hoping that Tagg has this horse ready And I made him my top pick in the race, just slightly over Bourbon Empire, who I have a lot of respect for, and who I think is going to be pretty good in this race. So they're my main two as far as the pick four goes. But this is a race where I think you want to keep some other horses open.
And certainly, if you're using the sort of ABC ticket structure, you have the opportunity to do that. A couple other little points about Royal Acadi. One, I assume you like to see this, Mike, as I do. The horse in November of the 3-year-old year ran the 79. We think of improvement between 2 and 3 all the time, but there's also improvement very often between 3 and 4. If you project off that number improvement of, I don't know, even if you just look at it of a point a month, all of a sudden Royal Acadi's speed figure potential seems to go up. And you talk about the layoff, much easier to support a horse coming off a layoff, I feel like, when you're comfortable with the hands that the horse is in, and also you see a work tab. On the screen, for those of you watching along, I showed how you can integrate the work tab with the running lines as part of the RF formulator. And as Mike pointed out, it's a pretty impressive looking work tab for his return to the races. General handicapping question for you, Mike, about the 2 and the 3 who you mentioned. I think a lot of horse players would look at the PP lines of Cause for Surprise and T Loves a Fight and say, oh, those last numbers were out of nowhere. They're short of bounce. Is that something, you didn't use that word, is that sort of implicit in your analysis of those two horses, though?
No. It's not. No, it's definitely not. I think that's not the reason that I'm concerned about them. I'm just more concerned when horses just sort of jump up out of nowhere. I'm not sure how big a believer in the bounce theory I am, actually. I mean, I'm not one who thinks it never happens, and I sort of understand the basic thinking behind it, but I also think it's a way overused term. And it's not just way overused by horse players, by the way. It's way overused by trainers and owners as well. And I think when it's used by those types of people in this game, it actually hurts the game, and it hurts the game very badly that these guys don't run their horses back because they think they need time between their races. And I think that's a fallacy. And I don't think that these two, I don't think you would worry that Cause for Surprise or T Loves a Fight's going to bounce in this race. I just think you want to really, take a hard look at them and think, are they really horses who are going to now be running high 80s and low to mid 90 buyers? Is that like a real thing for them now, or is there some other reason that they ran as well as they did in their most respective last races? I don't know. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. But it's pretty hard for me to believe that they're going to come back and run like that again. Maybe they will and maybe they won't. And I just want to say one other thing, and I think you made a great point about Royal Acadi coming off the layoff off of the best race of his life, because I do feel like, even though there are a lot of lightly raced horses in this race, I think when you start going through the field, I mean, if somebody is going to take another step forward in this race, if it's not him, I mean, who else is it really going to be, Pete? I mean, the other horses who are lightly raced have been in train. It's not like they're coming off of breaks here. They've been running, so they could come forward again a little bit. But this is the horse who I think, maybe outside of Voodoo Song, I shouldn't just dismiss him, whose lone start sprinting on the dirt in his debut was actually pretty good in a fast race at Saratoga. It was a race that was scheduled for turf, but he ran well in there, and it came back fast. And then he won on turf in his next start, and then they tried a stakes race around 2 turns over a inside speed favoring track where he had no chance. So he is a horse who I really feel like could jump up and surprise here for Hushin. So I don't think, rather than, personally speaking, this is for me from a pick four perspective, Cause for Surprise and T Loves a Fight. No, I'm not using them. Voodoo Song at a price in this race. Royal Acadi off the layoff. Yes, horses like that I do want to include in a pick 4 play, just because I just sort of feel like those are the horses who could really step forward in this race. And listen, if it turns out that all of a sudden Cause for Surprise is the horse that last race makes him look like, that he's probably going to win, and I'm going to be out of the pick 4.
But you got to take a stand somewhere, and it sounds like you're willing to take a stand with Bourbon Empire and Royal Acadi as A's, and maybe Voodoo Song is more of a B. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I would back up with Voodoo Song. I mean, I could use Fleet Irish as a backup in this race as he, finally turns back for George Weaver. I don't like necessarily all of first of all, his last race is a really fast race. Mr. Buff, who was eventually disqualified, and Stretches Stone, who we're going to talk about in a minute because he's in the Wood Memorial, they both ran great in that race. It was a fast race, and Mr. Buff has come back out of that race to win again since with an 88 buyer. He won here the other day in another fast race. So he's exiting a very live race here. And obviously he's turning back for the first time since his debut, where, Fleet Irish, he went 7/8 first time out. He came from way out of it at a big price, and he ran that field down. And he's done nothing but two-turn routing since then. He's going to get a little turn back in distance here. That probably works for him. I just don't love all the, I love the turn back for him. I just don't love all the changes with him where, now he's a gelding and blinkers off and Lasix on. There's a lot going on with this horse. And not only don't I like that, I don't love that, people, I think, and a lot of times people see that. They like to see all the changes, and they think maybe they overrate that kind of stuff. And so I wonder if it just sort of pulls more money his way. And I will just point out, as a C on my pick 4 ticket, just a horse who I will have for 50 cents, the one formal start. And if it's not for tomorrow, he may just have found a 1X that's too tough for him. But this horse is better than he looks on paper. He ran really well first time out. He was a huge price. He had a really tough trip in that race, and he ran really well. He came back at another big price, and he won very easily second time out. His race after that against Sail the Turtle, who was never going to be able to beat, and then he had a trip last time, and I don't think Blue Belt's any kind of superstar, the horse that beat him in there, but that horse just powered along up near the pace, and this horse had a real trip behind him, and I thought he did well to be second. He's one, if he can't get it done on Saturday, just sort of don't forget about him, because he's going to show up in one of these races at some point during the course of this meet, and he's going to find the right kind of field, and he won't get bet because of his connections. And this horse can run a little bit.
Another point about a horse like Formal Start, NYRA Bets offers superfecta wagering. This is a horse could be running late. No reason not to think about including a massive number in those third and fourth spots, as well as a penny on top. Let's move on to the Excelsior. We got a grade 3 going 1.25 miles. We're in the third leg of our NYRA Bets pick 4 here. Same question. Are you looking to get skinny, or are you looking to try to catch an outcome in this race?
Well, my thing with this race, I don't want to spread too much, although this is one that I feel like, it's only a 7-horse field. I think it's open to a lot of different horses. I mean, I don't know that this is a race where you want to sort of make some kind of stand, especially when you're talking about 1.25 miles, which is just sort of uncharted territory for almost everybody in here. There is one horse in the field who has a win at 1.25 miles. That's the horse on the outside. Do you know something? But I don't know. I just feel like it's an open kind of race. I started my handicapping in this race, thinking about the stymie and Do You Know Something, who's right there on your screen. He's exiting that race. He just missed in there with a late run at the end. I started off my handicapping looking at that race because I feel like it's, in a lot of ways, it is the key to the race. We have 3 horses. 3 of the 7 made their last start in the stymie, and they all ran pretty well. The thing with the stymie is, and I like the horse that won it, Sunny Ridge is a real good horse for Jason Service. The thing with that race is that for that distance on the Aqueduct Inner Dirt, they went a fast pace in that race. I mean, they were really going up front. Diversify, who I believe was the favorite in that race, or a close second choice, I think. I believe Send It In was the favorite, but Diversify was undefeated on the way in. He's a front running kind of horse, and he wanted the lead and he got it, but he went fast to make the lead in there. And there were a bunch of horses chasing him and pressing him. And the stymie at the end of the day is a race that went to closers. All the closers came along late and they dominated that race. Do You Know Something was one of those. The horse that won it, Sunny Ridge, was one of those. Send It In, who got up for third as the favorite, he was one of those. And so I just feel like it's the kind of race where you maybe don't want the horses who were necessarily running at the end of that race, because these are the horses who had the run of the race. And that's not a knock on either Send It In or Do You Know Something. They're in good form, but it did make me want to at least consider the 5th place finisher, Admiral Blue, who was sort of trying to keep up there, chasing the pace the entire way. They were going too fast for him. And he just got tired in the stretch, and the closers came and ran by him at the end. The thing that's interesting about Admiral Blue, first of all, is he's probably going to be a halfway decent price in this race. And second is, for a horse who felt like he had, and this is not saying that much when you're talking about Leon Bluchowicz, who just loves to put the word out on his horses and people love to bet his horses. So he took money early on in his career and he couldn't win. But it felt like there was something there with him. He wasn't going to be a superstar, but he could run a little bit. His last two races, they're far and away the best races this horse has ever run in his life. He broke his maiden in the mud, and it wasn't a particularly fast race. He got a perfect trip, and he got it done in that race. But his next two starts have been a huge jump forward for him. He was really good 2 starts back, chasing Diversify the entire way and not letting that horse get away from him, and almost, in fact, catching him at the end at a huge price. And then he came back in the stymie, chased a fast pace the entire way. He got a little tired. I don't know. I don't know if he's good enough to win this. I don't know if he really wants a 1.25 miles. But he is not a horse to just look at the stymie and say, well, send it in. Do you know something? They were, very close at the end, and this horse was nowhere at the end. And give me those two and not him. I don't know. I kind of look at it the opposite way. And maybe I would be using Admiral Blue in some capacity on my ticket. Really, at the end of the day, though, I don't love the stymie. And so I made my top pick in the race, Hereditary, for Shug. It's not a sexy pick, and it's not a horse who I have a ton of confidence in. My thinking with Hereditary is simply this. I think he'll get the distance. He's a 6-year-old now. He's got a ton of pedigree. He's obviously he's a Phipps homebred, so they all have pedigree.
Oh yeah.
And this horse has pedigree, but it's interesting to sort of pick apart his past performances, especially from the early part of his career, because he actually started out like he might be okay. After his debut, which was sprinting, this horse, he finished first. He got disqualified from one of them, but he finished first in 3 straight races when Shug stretched him out. 3 different tracks, 3 different distances. He won them all. He got up to a 90 Beyer speed figure at Keeneland in his 4th career start. And he was way the best in that race. But the interesting thing about him is, even as he was running, well for Shug, it's nothing but little layoff lines in between those races. Almost like Shug, was having trouble keeping this horse together and keeping races for him. He finally got 3 races together early on last year. But, a 1-turn mile, a sloppy track, and then he ran another 94 and got laid off finally for a little bit of an extended period after that May 29th race. He finally got a layoff after that race. In fact, he's come back. I know the races are at Tampa, and he, wasn't meeting the greatest horses in the world, but I think he has improved since he's come back off the layoff. I liked his first dirt start back. That race on January 7th, he was closing at the end, and he just couldn't get up. The horse that beat him got a perfect trip. And then he just steamrolled that field in the second dirt start back. And, listen, it wasn't the strongest field in the world, but the horse that ran second to him, 2 Cuban Brothers U, that horse, I think he's maybe won 15 or 16 races in his career. He is not a bad horse. And this horse just came and ran him right over in the stretch. And then he was a good third last time in the Challenger. They just took him back to last. Stanford went right to the front at the shortest of prices and basically wired the field. And Hereditary, I like the way that he finished up in that race. So I feel like, maybe all things being equal in here, he's not any better than anybody else in here, but maybe he's finally putting things together for Shug, and maybe the distance helps him more than it helps some of the other horses. And so I made him my top pick in the race. And I'm going to, he's definitely going to be one of the horses I focus my pick 4 play around.
Do you like Admiral Blue at the A level as well, or are you seeing Hereditary more as a lone A with Admiral Blue as a strong backup?
I feel like I'm going to back up with Admiral Blue. And I feel like if I use another A, I don't know how much I want to put, all my eggs in Hereditary's basket, because at the end of the day, I'm not sure how good he actually is, but I definitely want to use him as an A. And I want to use the other horse that I want to use as an A, who's not a stymie horse, is the one Bellamy Way, who's, we'll see what happens with him. He's always hinted at having a lot of potential for David Canizzo. He never really did, put it together, but he would just come out and run, he'd run well every time, but then every once in a while he would just show up with some huge race. And that's what he did off the layoff last time. Now this horse is good off of layoffs. He's always run well off of layoffs. and he loves the inner dirt. So those are things that, are in the back of my mind, make me think, well, he had a lot of things go right for him last time. Not a very good field, fresh off the layoff, which is good for him, favorite racetrack, which is good for him, and he just crushed that field with a big run around the second turn. On the other hand, I do think he's a better two-turn horse. Maybe he gets the distance. I don't know. I'm a little worried about it, but maybe he gets the mile and a quarter. He's got a great post on the inside, so at least Manny Franco can save some ground with him and then see what kind of run he can make. He's 12-1 on the line. I'm going to use him. I'll probably make him an A, along with Hereditary, Admiral Blue, and the stymie horses, who, I might way against. I don't want to just, totally pitch them, but I'm going to use them just mostly as backups in this pick 4, especially because, Send It In, he's the favorite again. And I thought he ran fine last time, but I wasn't, so taken with his performance. He's got to go a mile and a quarter, and Do You Know Something, who is the horse who has a win at a mile and a quarter, which I like. He's another one. He's sort of had all the best of it last time in the stymie, closing from off that fast pace.
Yeah, I love the point you made about Admiral Blue perhaps being the one you want out of that race because of how hot the pace is. There's other tools you can use like Timeform US, and I'm pretty sure you're going to see that race on the Timeform US PPs coded as red, at least to some of the fractions. And so to see a horse like Admiral Blue, who's close to that red hot pace, and maybe not be there so much at the end, but still manage to run a final time figure of a 94 buyer speed figure, knowing it was getting sort of the worst of it pace-wise. That's the kind of thing a lot of times with a more even run next time, they can turn the tables on those rivals who beat them the previous time and sometimes be a longer price. So I'm very won over by that argument for Admiral Blue.
Yeah, the other thing, that's the other thing, that's right. It's a very good point. It's very interesting. Obviously, that's just one of those, sort of things that you sort of always have to keep in mind, and that, these races, more often than not are won, not by the horses who are in them, but by how the race is run and who is best suited by that kind of stuff. In this race, you have the added, obstacle of the distance, because that's going to, go a long way to determining who wins this race, who gets the distance and who doesn't. These mile and a quarter races could be tough on some of these horses, but I think it's a good point you brought up about Timeform US, who probably has that rate, that those fractions color coded red as a fast pace. If you look at the Timeform US speed figures for that race, which do obviously take pace into account, and they factor that into their figures, Admiral Blue actually, despite finishing a good couple of lengths behind Send It In, he got a better speed figure for that race than Send It In. And Send It In got a 121, Admiral Blue a 122 pace adjusted speed figure, because he was so close to a fast pace while Send It In was last and, running at the end of the race.
That's a great point, and another thing that's unique and cool about Timeform US and how you can use them in conjunction with the traditional formulator PPs. Here you can see the line, and in fact, it does have. You can see just from the pace figures, pretty fast early. Then you get that 133 coded in red, and then here you can click on the Timeform USA chart, and if my computer will cooperate, we'll see exactly what Mike said. Because of the way the algorithm works, you'll see final time figures, you'll see performance figures upgraded. Where my cursor is now, that's the column with the performance figures. These numbers here to the far right are the sort of equivalent of the buyer that are just based on the final time figure of the race, and then upgraded or downgraded based on the race setup. Just one of the many cool tools in Timeform USA that can help with a product like Formulator, augment your handicapping. Let's move it on to race 9. It's the Grade 1 Carter, another one of my favorite races of the spring. Lets me know we're getting into the good time of the year. We've got an interesting little 9-horse field here. How will it be approached in a pick 4 standpoint? Are you willing to lean on number 8 Unified at all here, Mike?
I'm going to use him. I'm not going to lean on him. I just want to warn people ahead of time right now that the way I handicapped this race, the way I ultimately landed in this race, on a horse who I've never really been a fan of, and a horse who I've never really liked all that much. And I sort of feel like this is just anecdotal, and I don't, it's not something that I've ever tracked or tried to figure out how it works for me over time. But I feel like I'm probably 0 for my life when I wind up picking horses that I was never fans of, and for some reason I talk myself into them in some race, and I decide to bet them, and then they never win.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I did that in the Carter. And I wound up making my top pick Ocean Knight, the horse on the outside. And ultimately, what it came down to for me with Ocean Knight was mostly two things. I think he ran well in the General George last time. They turned him back to the 7. He didn't get out of the gate that well. He was just sort of slow from the gate. He got outrun to last for the first part of the race. He was, I know that, on Laurel that day, General George Day, it just sort of felt like you didn't want to be towards the inside. You wanted to be wide. And this horse was on the outside the entire way, but I don't know if you wanted to be as wide as he was. I mean, he was basically, 4 or 5 wide all the way around the track after getting off to a slow start. And then I thought he sort of raced on really gamely through the stretch in that race. He just kept coming at the end of the race. He never looked like he was going to win, but he kept running at the end. And I sort of thought it was an okay try for him, 7/8. And it was an okay try in a race where I think the winner of that race is a really good horse, Imperial Hint, who unfortunately didn't get to run in Dubai, but I think he was going to be a huge factor in that race in Dubai if he could have made that start. I think he's a really good horse. So I like that performance from Ocean Knight. And then, so you start looking at him, and, as a horse who I've never really liked that much, you sort of start picking apart his past performances. And there's a lot of route racing going on. Obviously, Kieran, at the beginning thought he was going to be a Derby horse. That didn't work out. He brought him back from a couple of different layoffs, and he kept, sort of keeping him going at least a mile, maybe a little longer than that. Never really won anything good. Didn't really run particularly well when they tried the better horses with him going longer. But you start looking at his sprint races only, the races where he went either 6 or 7 furlongs. There's his debut, where he ran a 93 Beyer first time out. Now, that was a race that had a really fast pace duel in front of him. They were going great guns in front of him. He got a perfect trip, but he also ran that field over in the stretch with a fast figure. He didn't sprint again until August of the next year, which was off of a 6-month layoff at Saratoga, more than 6-month layoff at Saratoga. And he finished a good second to Waco, a horse at that time who just loved Saratoga, and who just refused to stop running in the stretch. And this horse couldn't catch him, but I thought he ran well considering it was a layoff and a speed favoring track that day. He doesn't sprint again until the next year, the Saratoga meet last year on August 8th, 7 furlongs, a race where I thought he ran sneaky well that day. And it was one of those races where I sort of wondered what Kieran would do with him after that, because he actually made a really good run into that race, and he got right up about on even terms with the winner of that race in the stretch. And then I think the layoff got to him. He just got tired at the end of that race and got outfinished, but I thought he ran sneaky well that day. So what do they do with him? They stretch him back out in distance. They go a mile 3 times. They try the Kelso, the Cigar Mile, which he was never going to win. They go a 2-turn mile at Aqueduct where he wins. And then they turn him back in the General George, and I think he ran well again. So I wonder if they finally figured out that Ocean Knight wants to sprint and he doesn't want to go long. And if that's the case for him, maybe this is a field he can beat. I'm like you, Pete. I love the Carter, and when I see the Carter come up, I know that spring is here and the racing is going to start getting really good. But come on, man, this is not a strong Carter. This did not get a strong field of sprinters, and certainly not a field of, grade 1 quality sprinters in here. So I don't know, maybe Ocean Knight fits right in. He's got a good post on the outside, and he can maybe get the right trip in this race. And I'm just going to try him in here. And I made him an A in my pick 4, along with Unified, who I like, but I don't love.
No, I mean, there are some questions that need to be answered when it comes to Unified. What about our old friend Tommy Macho, a horse who I have found myself landing on in a number of big spots over the years? Will his number be on your pick 4 tickets?
I'm thinking at this stage of the game that it won't be. I have to decide at some point whether I feel like it would be worth it to get knocked out of a pick 4 by a horse who can clearly win. And a lot of times that's the biggest mistake that you can make when you play multi-race wagers, because really they're all about surviving, and they're all about cashing. I mean, you have to cash these bets, and even if that means as a backup with a lower payoff, you don't want to go empty-handed, especially losing to a horse like this who can clearly win. As of now, I'm not thrilled with his recent form. I know that he ran a big figure 2 starts back when he won that Hell's Hope. I don't know about that. I mean, I thought he ran fine in that race. I didn't think it was great. I didn't think he ran well at all last time. He wasn't going to beat Sharp as Tekka, but I didn't think he ran well in that race. And obviously 2 races prior to that, no good at all. So there's that long layoff after the Hooper, and he's run 4 times since then. I just think it's sort of ho-hum and not that great. And the other thing about him that really bothers me, and I wonder what your take on this is going to be. This is a horse who hasn't sprinted since he broke his maiden in May of 2015. Most of the time, I like horses turning back in distance. I think turnbacks, especially the 7 furlongs, I like turnbacks. But I don't like all turnbacks. And I don't think turning back in distance suits every horse. And I wonder if it's going to suit this horse. I don't look at Tommy Macho's races and think he's a good sprinter. They should sprint this horse. I feel like this horse was better going longer. I think he got a lot better once Todd stretched him out. So I wonder how much this horse really wants to sprint. What do you think of that?
Those are definitely fair questions. I'll say this. To me, I like turnbacks as much as the next horse player, but there's also a big difference between a turnback that's going to be putting fitness into the horse, something that happened within 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and a turnback off a layoff. To me, once you're talking about a turnback off a layoff, it's no longer, to me, any kind of fitness move that's going to help a horse. It would just be a question of exactly what you asked, Mike. Is this something the horse really wants to do?
Right.
This horse has been effective enough going one turn, the 7 furlongs being kind of the extended sprint. That's why I feel like it's maybe enough in his wheelhouse that for me, it might come down to a question of in Pletcher we trust, because as you point out, it's a cool race, but it's not exactly the grade 1 plus type race that it's been in some years. So out of deference to Pletcher, I might include in some combinations.
And that's right. And that's probably the smart way to look at it, actually, when you're talking about a pick 4. Listen, let's just put it out there like this. I would never bet him to win this race. But as far as a pick 4 goes, maybe you're supposed to use him at least somewhere, because if nothing else, I mean, I think all things being equal, and we'll find out what Unified turns out to be. He's so lightly raced. I mean, there's nobody in this field with upside like Unified has. I mean, if anybody turns out to be really good, it's going to be him. But based on what they've done so far, I mean, I think you would have to admit that Tommy Macho, you have to sort of take his last 4 races since that layup with a little grain of salt, but he's the most accomplished horse and probably the best horse in the race. I don't like his recent form, and I don't like him sprinting, but he could obviously win here. Unified he was a tough call for me, Pete. I like him as a horse. I really liked him last year. I thought he started out like he was going to, really be something pretty good. I don't love that layoff, obviously, from June until February. And when he came back off the layoff, great. He ran a 101. That's fine. And, maybe he goes forward from there. But, boy, talk about a great spot to start back in off of a layoff where you just get loose on the lead. I felt like, Mind Your Biscuits is a really good horse. I felt like he was probably prepping in that race, though. He didn't really get going until very late in that race, and he still almost ran this horse down. I don't know. Maybe he comes forward off of that race, and maybe he does actually turn out to be the horse that it looked like he could be. But I'm starting to wonder, how good is Unified actually going to turn out to be? And, what is he in this race? Is he even money at post time in this race, 6-5, something like that? I mean, he's going to be a pretty heavy favorite, I think.
He's going to be real short. I mean, I think based on the case that you've made, he's got to be an A. One other thing I want to touch on before we move on from the NYRA Bets pick 4, my general way of approaching that question you asked about, do you include a likely winner in your multi, even if you don't love the horse? For me, the longer the multi-race bet is, pick 4, pick 5, pick 6, I'm more apt in those races, if I have strong opinions elsewhere, to try to include the Tommy Machos of the world. Whereas in doubles and pick 3s, I feel more comfortable attacking a horse like that. Is that?
Oh, yes. I agree with that. That's a very good point. Maybe I should have made that more clear. In doubles, I wouldn't go anywhere near a horse like him, and in pick 3s either. I almost at this stage of the game, I love the pick 4 and the pick 5. I almost treat doubles and pick 3s even like win bets, and I would not be including horses that you're just throwing money away, including horses like him and those kinds of bets. But you're right. The longer you get pick 4s, pick 5s, they're all about cashing, man. And you don't want to go too many of those in a row without getting. Even if it's a horse that you don't like that much, without getting some of your money back, at least on a backup ticket.
A couple of quick notes from our sponsor, NYRA Bets, before we move on to the 3 big 3-year-old races of the weekend. Players that bet the pick 4 through NYRA Bets will get a 15% bonus if they win. That bonus is capped at $100 per player. And Mike gave some great thoughts there on how to approach that bet. Take his thoughts, combine them with your own, and hopefully you'll have something to celebrate, parimutually speaking, on Saturday afternoon. Also, a quick reminder that Aqueduct Live will be airing nationally on FS2 at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. NBC Sports will then televise the Wood, Bluegrass, and Santa Anita Derby. All right, let's talk about the featured event of the day. I don't care if it's technically a grade 2. It's a grade 1 in my heart. It's the Wood Memorial. Where are you going here, Mike Beer?
Well, listen, the whole theory of the Wood is this. I mean, either you think that Motown, the 2, and or Irish War Cry, the 8, can get back to one of their good races and be competitive in here, or you think that they can't. And if you think that they can't, then to me, and this is not a knock on Battalion Runner, who's, perfectly fine for puncher, but if they can't run anymore, if they're just not as good as they, ever appeared to be, then I just think Cloud Computing is going to win for Chad Brown. I'm hoping that at least one of them can get back to one of their good races, and that's the way that I picked the race and the way that I will be betting the race. But if they can, I think you have to be open to the possibility that they are, either were never as good as they looked like they were, or they're just not that good anymore. If that's the case, then I mean, how tough is Cloud Computing going to be to beat in this race? I mean, I thought he ran great last time. He was really impressive first time out in a race where I don't think anybody would have faulted him if he didn't win that race after getting off to sort of a slow start, raced very greenly early. But he came with a big run, and he ran down a horse who's pretty good. Mineralogy's in the first race on Saturday at Aqueduct. He's going to be very tough in that race. He's a fast horse. So he ran that horse down, and then he comes right back. And how well did this horse run in the Gotham, Pete? I know you saw the race.
Tremendous.
Fast pace. He chased it the entire way. J-Boy's Echo ran by him in the stretch, but this horse never stopped running at the end. He kept trying to come back on him. I mean, they're asking a lot of him. It's just his 3rd career start. They're stretching him out again in distance. But boy, I think this horse is pretty good. I think he's the horse to beat in here, even though I picked against him.
Yeah, for me, I like to use sort of a blended approach in my horse playing, a combination. I'm a very numbers-oriented player, as anyone would know who's listened to me talk about racing on the DRF Players podcast or in these webinars. But then there's also something about the visual impression that horses give.
Yeah.
Cloud Computing, he was obviously one of these international good things before his first race, bet incredibly. And sort of the specifics of the word that I heard was, if he breaks, he's going to win for fun. Then, of course, He doesn't break, and he still manages to make about 2.5 to 3 moves during the race and win, at which point I had said on the podcast, this is going to be a graded stakes winner. Again, you nailed it in the Gotham, maybe just a little bit too close. I didn't blame Manny Franco. I thought the horse looked a little keen first time stretching out, and also it's important to remember that the horse to beat in that race on paper, El Arib, was in front of him, but it ends up setting up perfectly for J-Boy's Echo. But I'm not convinced Cloud Computing isn't the better horse of those two. I'll be betting him again on Wood Day. Unfortunately, the price is going to be a little bit shorter. But let's talk about your top pick, Motown, and why you've chosen to forgive the effort in the Risen Star.
Yeah, well, this is sort of an anti-opinion, the way that I look at it. By the way, before we get to that, what price do you really think the Battalion Runner will be favored in here? I sort of feel like Cloud Computing is going to be the favorite at post time. Do you agree with that? I mean, I'm a terrible morning line maker. I'm terrible at guessing these things.
I'm not good.
Yeah, I just feel like, I think Cloud Computing, I think he's one of those horses everybody likes. I wonder if he won't go favored in this race. We'll see what happens.
He did manage to be 8-1 last time, nearly.
Yeah, true.
And the hype machine has definitely been rolling on Battalion Runner, who's, granted, obviously much weaker fields, but been bet like he couldn't lose in the last 2. I think a gun to my head, I would go with I'm comfortable with the way the morning line has it, but it would not surprise me at all if you're right. I wouldn't
be surprised either. I mean, I don't like to argue with the morning line that Eric Donovan makes. He's always right, but we'll see what happens. As far as Battalion Runner goes, and you're right, the hype machine's in full swing. I don't really get this horse. I like his last 2 races just fine. I like all 3 of his races just fine, as a matter of fact. I think he's run well in all of them, but I don't know. I wonder. I know that Todd's got them all. You know, he's got all the good 3-year-olds now. He's finding the perfect spots for all of them, and nobody wins these races like Todd does. But I don't know. This horse doesn't do that much for me. I don't, in particular, his last race. I don't like that race that much. Although I do think Beasley. I think the horse that he beat is okay, but we'll see what happens. I don't like Battalion Runner. I particularly don't like him as the favorite, and I didn't really want to use him in this race. So let's get back to Motown. I understand that I don't have a ton of firm ground to stand on with this horse right now. But I think there's some firm ground to stand on with this horse. And that's one of the reasons I like him. And like I said before, I think it's a little bit of an anti-opinion because I just sort of feel like all of a sudden nobody likes this horse anymore. And maybe there's a reason for that. I mean, but you know, he's really going to go off at 6-1 in this race. If he is, I'm just going to bet him and hope that he can still run. And if I'm wrong, I'm just going to lose money. But you know, that's happened before. I like this horse. I liked him as a 2-year-old, maybe better than any 2-year-old that I saw last year. I liked all 3 of his races. I thought he ran great first time out at Saratoga. Obviously, he was really impressive when he won his second start over a muddy track. And then you have the Remsen, where, I mean, he just dominated that field at 1 1/8. So what's the knock on the Remsen? The knock on the Remsen is, in retrospect, and I don't think anybody felt this way after it was run, immediately after it was run. I feel like at least my take on it was Motown ran great. No Dozing ran great with a pretty tough trip. And Tactful, you know, considering it was just his second career start, stretching out from a sprint to a 1 1/8 graded stakes race, ran fine. Since then, that whole thing has fallen apart. Yeah, I mean, nobody's really run that well out of the race. Tactful has turned out to not, maybe, I don't want to say it has turned out to not be that good. Maybe that's the case, but it's more to me that he's turned out not to be a horse who wants to go that long. They've tried routing with him 3 straight times after he ran the huge race first time out. They tried routing with him 3 times since, and it's been one disaster after another. No Dozing, you know, he looked like a good horse on the way into that race. He had run really well behind Classic Empire in his start prior to the Remsen with a pretty tough trip. He ran really well. Then he ran really well in the Remsen again. He's come back and not run that great as a 3-year-old. And then you have Motown, who ran great in the Remsen, and he comes back off a layoff, and I thought it was a kind of a weird spot for Dutrow to ship him to the fairgrounds anyway, and he just bombs at a short price. Yes, fast pace. Yes, he chased it early ahead of everybody else, and then he just got really tired and he stopped running. It's not a great sign for him that he ran as poorly as he did. I still don't get the thinking that all of a sudden he's a no-hoper. I don't believe I think the most popular take on the Remsen now is that it's a negative key race. I don't believe it. I don't look at races that way. And I don't think that that's really the case with the Remsen. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's not how I'm looking at it. And I'm giving this horse one more chance in here. If he can still run, maybe he can't, but if he can still run and he can take a step forward in this race, I think he can beat this field. And I'm just going to hope that that's the case in this race. And he's got a great post towards the inside, and he's not slow. So I think he's going to get the right trip in this race. There's not a ton of pace in here. I'm going to give this horse a chance to rebound here. For me, it's him, and it's Cloud Computing, and it's nobody else.
All right, NYRA Bets is offering a 3 million point giveaway. Simply make a winning trifecta wager, $1 minimum, in the Wood, the Bluegrass, or Santa Anita Derby to qualify for a slice of those 3 million points. If you had to name a trifecta cold in here, Mike, where the level of difficulty just went way up, but if you were to name a trifecta cold, who would it be?
It would be 2, 7, and 6. Throw Stretches Stone in there, the New York bred, for Bruce Levine. Throw him in there at a price to try and complete your trifecta.
I like it. Let's do a little just quick speed round look at the Bluegrass and the Santa Anita Derby. For me, not the most interesting opinion in the world in the Bluegrass, but I'm looking for McCracken to show his stuff. And the one I think is the main danger to him is Tapwrit. Do you have anything clever in there, or are you going in the chalky direction that I am?
You can have McCracken. He's all yours. If he wins at a short price, I mean, I don't really get this. I mean, not that I don't get him. I think he's a good horse, but I don't know why you'd want to take a short price on him. And, Tapper seems fine to me, but I don't know. I know he keeps improving. I think he has to improve again if he's going to win the Bluegrass, so he's not for me as the second choice. I like Jay Boy's Echo. We already discussed the Gotham. He got a perfect trip and won, but he also, as long as that race came out of nowhere, Pete, he looked like he was going to be a good horse before that. He ran faster in that race than any of these horses has run in any one of their races, and he's the fourth choice on the morning line. I'm happy to bet him one more time. If he's going to be the fourth choice, I'm happy to bet him one more time. And, maybe Practical Joe can do a little better for Chad. I don't believe he really wants to go long, but I do think he'll get close to the pace this time. There's not a lot of speed in here. And I think he will get close to the pace this time, and maybe that'll help his chances. I picked at 3-7, and then I'll put McCracken third.
All right, I like it. And let's move out west to the other major Derby prep of the weekend, talking, of course, about the Santa Anita Derby. This is an interesting looking race. This is a bit of a head scratcher with the leader of the division, unfortunately, out after that. Talk about visually arresting performances, what Mastery did in the prep for this. Without him, it's a lot of them have come out of the cabinets to try to get a piece of what's theirs. Do you have a strong opinion in here?
No, I don't. I thought it was really tough. I guess I'll say this. I think the strong opinion that I have, if you want to call it strong, is I won't be betting Iliad as the favorite. I mean, maybe he'll win. I thought he ran fine against Mastery last time, but I don't know. I'm not sure that I think that horse is that great, and I'm not sure that I think he's a true 9 for a long kind of horse. I think it might be a little bit better going shorter. So I'll be against him if he's going to be the favorite. My problem is once I decided that, I didn't really know what to do in here. I don't know. Gormley's, his last race was so bad. I mean, is he going to turn it around? American Anthem, who I was pretty high on, I don't know what happened at Oaklawn with him, but he was terrible in that race. Can he rebound? I'd like to think that he can. If you put a gun to my head and said make a pick, I would pick American Anthem and just hope that Baffert, I don't think Baffert would run him in the Santa Anita Derby if he thought he was going to embarrass himself. So I liked his first two starts a lot. So I'm going to give him a chance to rebound. I'm making my top pick, and then I would just use sort of outsiders, or maybe, I don't know how outside they are, but use other horses outside of the name horses underneath them. Horses like, I like Battle of Midway, the 3. I don't think he's a great price on the morning line at 5-1. I wouldn't bet him at that price, but I think he's okay. I like his last race. I like his debut a lot, and I like his last race. Maybe he's okay. And I would use, just as a sort of a longer price horse, I would use the 7 Kim Bear. I don't know how far he wants to go, but what I do know about him is the 2 dirt races that he's run are both really good. I know they're both sprints, but they're both really good. Even the runner-up finish behind Iliad last December was a really good performance. I wonder if he's just a dirt horse who's finally getting to run on dirt. I would use him, sort of as an underneath horse in tries.
Sometimes when you see a race like this where you don't like the favorite, where there are so many question marks, is that a place where you're more inclined to be inclusive of a seeming outsider like Kim Bear, who at least brings to the fact that he's unexposed, we don't really have any idea how good he is, and he should be a huge price? Is that part of the attraction?
Yeah, definitely. It comes down to that. I think that not only it's the races where you're not so sure about the favorites, it's also races like this where I sort of felt like before their last race, I felt like both American Anthem and Gormley were good horses. I really did think they were sort of near the top of the 3-year-old division. And then they both run like that in their last races. And, to me, those horses become really dicey because I don't think you just want to, maybe you have an excuse for those 2 performances. And if you do, that's one thing. But if it's just sort of you watch them and there's no real excuse, they just don't run that well, you got to be very careful to just put a line through a race and just say, well, I'm going to give them that one. Especially at short prices. I think you want to be really careful when horses are no-shows to just say, well, it was an aberration. And if you don't have a real excuse for it, you want to sort of think twice before you just forgive horses like that.
It's such a big question this weekend. In all 3 of these races, there are horses you have to decide whether to do that or whether to not do that, and how you answer those questions is going to probably go a long way towards how you do. Well, we're at the end of the hour. Mike Beer, I want to thank you so much for joining us. One last word from our sponsor. NYRA Now is the new NYRA Bets app. This is a free way to watch racing on the go with both archived, on-demand content and live content. It's very cool. I've been playing around with it a little bit. Look forward to using it more in the coming days, weeks, and months. For more about NYRA Now, check out NYRA.com/NOW. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for this handicapping session for Wood Memorial Day. Thanks also to our sponsor, NYRA Bets. We'll be back with more shows in the future. Keep a look out on the drf.com website for the marquee with a full list of stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. Mike Beer, thank you again. Great getting to spend some time with you this morning.
Thanks a lot, Pete. Good luck, everybody. It's a big weekend.
And for everybody out there, you've been watching a handicapping session produced by drf.com.